always used to tell me, I had a wonderful father, very smart. He used to say, son, when you walk into a restaurant and you see a dirty front door, don't go in. Because if the front door is dirty, the kitchen's dirty also. Same thing with the Capitol. If our Capitol's dirty, our whole country is dirty, and they don't respect us.
Dirty, dirty, dirty. President Trump yesterday got the Democrats out of the closet again. They live in a lot of closets, don't they? Got the Democrats out of the closet again. Now they're pro-crime. They're pro-murder. The Democrat Party is deadly. They shoot a lot of people. We should call on the Democrats to stop shooting people. Just a thought. And I talked about it a little bit yesterday. All the mayhem in D.C., the looting, the arsons, the violent riots that went on for days and days in Washington. And then you see Dana Bash. I'm a little concerned about Dana Bash at CNN. I think she might be suffering from early onset Alzheimer's or some kind of a dementia at such a relatively, I'm going like this with my hand kind of back and forth, relatively young age, you know. But for this kind of behavior, yesterday on the television, she's right there on the television. She said, oh, yeah, that January 6th, that was the most violent, what was the most violent time ever in the history of Washington since the British attacked in 1814 or something. Isn't that amazing? The media, wait till you hear this, because they just don't pay attention. They don't follow the news. They have no memory of the things that have happened in this city. The Democrats rioting at the Trump White House for 3 days, injuring 180 police, setting fire to the church of the presidents, forcing the evacuation of the president and the first family from the residence in the White House. No memory of that whatsoever. No, just January 6th, where Ashley Babbitt was shot and killed by a racist police officer, and the Democrats applauded. And that means CNN, the media, they loved it. They really love it. They love it when Democrats like Luigi Mangione shoot down CEOs in New York City. I know that's not Washington. It's a different city. Amazing stuff. And I talked about it yesterday. How does and they're telling us, oh, yeah, and MSDNC yesterday, they were all over, oh, crime is way down in Washington, D.C. And all the Democrats, they're all singing from the same sheet music. The liberal on my TV show last night doing the same thing on Newsmax. Oh, crime is way down. Yeah, from war zone to less lethal war zone. Much more deadly, Washington, D.C., than Baghdad. Much more deadly than Baghdad. In fact, I meant to look this up because I heard on the radio this morning that I think we've crossed the 100 murder threshold in Washington, D.C. And I was scratching my head thinking, now, how many troops did we lose in Afghanistan our last year in Afghanistan? How many troops did we have killed in our second to last year in Afghanistan? Because I believe that Washington, D.C. is more lethal, more deadly than Afghanistan was over the course of a year. And the Democrats, they shrugged. They're like, who cares? We don't care how many. It's Democrats. The problem is not our guns. It's their sons, as I have so prudently said in the past. But the Democrats, they're all, oh, no, crime is way down. Overall violent crime in D.C. is down 26%. We're still more lethal than any place in Azerbaijan. We're more lethal than any capital city you find anywhere in the world, pretty much. And they're fine with that. And if you bring it up, then they start shouting you down and calling you a racist, and they get back to shooting people. There was another murder downtown Washington. What was it? 12th and M, like Mary. At about 7, it was in the 7 o'clock hour. In the 5 o'clock hour, I was at 14th and M, Northwest. These are in Northwest Washington, D.C. Remarkable thing. So the Democrats, they're out of the closet fighting for more crime. You know that they're fighting for more crime because if you're fighting against crime, then they're fighting with you. They're attacking you. They're blaming you. And they're making up fatuous lies about how great things are when it comes to crime. Hey, our carjackings are down from 950 carjackings in a year in a city that's 66 square miles with 700,000 people. And the carjackings are down. Yeah, down to what? Still worse than Afghanistan, but never mind that. They're amazing. So the media, the Democrats, I repeat myself, law enforcement to increase in D.C. at Trump's direction. And Newsmax TV has a great story on this. Newsmax Online has a great story on this. And they pointed out a couple of inconvenient truths. Remember when the Democrats used to be obsessed with inconvenient truths? Isn't it amazing? Now, they looked at 18, and this is the United Nations and the U.S. Congress, looked at killings in national capitals around the world. And they looked at a 5-year swath from 2019 to 2024. That's 5 years. And in Washington, D.C., we had in that 5-year period 41 homicides per 100,000 per population of 100,000. I think that's 289 murders in a year when you're 41 per 100,000 at 700,000 population. So 41, that's our murder rate in Washington, 41 per 100,000. And the next closest was Montevideo in Uruguay with 16.1, right? We're that's per 100,000, 16 per 100,000. We are 41 per 100,000. And that is the next most lethal capital, according to the United Nations and the U.S. Congress. Baghdad has a homicide rate over that 5-year period of 15 per 100,000. Washington, D.C., 41 per 100,000. Lagos, Nigeria. I know you want to say Lagos, but in Nigeria they say Lagos. Lagos, Nigeria, murder rate of 15 per 100,000. Washington, D.C., 41 per 100,000. And the Democrats applaud that. All right, we need more of this. You know what we need to do? We need to not fight crime. We need to call anybody that is fighting crime a racist, don't you think? Because Democrats, they're not well at all. And by the way, you know, somebody should pay attention to black crime because this is an issue. Here is this is quite the Bureau of Justice Statistics. They compared the homicide victimization rate of white people in the United States versus black people in the United States. That is how many people are murdered, white versus black. White people murdered at a rate in the United States in 2023 of 13 per 100,000. Wait, pardon me, scratch that. Let me correct. I'm still looking back at Lagos and some. Homicide victimization for white people, 3.2 per 100,000. Again, Washington, D.C., 41 per 100,000. White people in the United States, 3.2 per 100,000. For black people, 21.3 per 100,000, about 7 times the homicide rate for black people than you have for white people in the United States. And the Democrats make sure, and that means the news media too, make sure that nobody talks about that because they shout you down as a racist for citing statistics. And, you know, I think they invest in coffin companies. I really do. They must, Democrat leaders must be invested in funeral homes, caskets, and ammunition. Aren't they amazing? Yes, they are. Because I went and I looked at these absolutely crazy numbers. White people, 3 per 100,000. Black people, 21 per 100,000. And who's addressing that? Well, nobody. President Trump didn't talk about that yesterday either. That he knows the Democrats will just call him a racist. And the real racist are the leaders that are silent on this because it matters. You know, it's human lives. Of course, they abort 40% of the black population in the womb in most of our big cities. But never mind that, 40% in the womb. Now, the numbers are crazy, but maybe somebody should talk about it. I don't want to, put the blame on anybody. But maybe Barack Obama, maybe Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, our most populous city, who is black. Maybe Brandon Johnson, the black mayor of Chicago, Illinois. Maybe Karen Bass, the black mayor of Los Angeles, California. Maybe Muriel Bowser, the black mayor of Washington, D.C. But no, that's not what's happening because you can't talk about it. It's taboo. Can you say taboo in this context? So we got that going. There is a crime crisis in the United States, America, in our big cities, and in black America, a crime crisis. And our political leaders are not up to the task. And the black political leaders are a disgrace. And they should be ashamed of themselves, but Democrats are pretty much incapable of shame. We got that. MSDNC, MS-13 on cable. MS-13 DNC aired a live fact check of President Trump's D.C. crime stats, and the radical left-wing media slobs at the left-wing Mediaite, they were very excited. MS-13 DNC airs graphic showing drop in D.C. crime as Trump compares city to Baghdad in wild presser. They didn't say that Trump was wrong in anything that he said, comparing it to Baghdad, because they're United Nations numbers that they're using, and the U.S. Congress as the numbers they're using. And they're saying, oh, President Trump's comparing it to Baghdad, legitimately so. And they say, oh, robberies in MSDNC, say robberies in the U.S. are down 8.9%. And it's pretty amazing stuff. But in D.C., according to the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, robbery down 28%. And at MSDNC, they say, oh, yeah, from an all-time high in 2023 to 2024, it's because so many of bad guys were killed that there weren't really enough of them around to do what they like to do and what they always do. Isn't that amazing? Overall violent crime down 4.5%, MSDNC. 4.5% across the U.S., down 26% in D.C., again, from a spike year, a peak year in 2023 going into 2024. And you know what they blame the spike on? COVID. That's the COVID crime, is what they say. And homicides, they say, down across the U.S., 14.9%. In D.C., down 12%, again, from a ridiculous high. And I think that we now in August hit 100 homicides so far this year, with the homicide on 12th Street, 12th and M. I was at 14th and M. But when you hear the gunfire, just take shelter, because teach your kids how to duck and cover, because there are a lot of Democrats out there shooting people, like the intern on Capitol Hill, 20-year-old young man, came to Washington to learn about government, and he was gunned down in the street randomly, at random, shot repeatedly, and dead. No, pay no attention. Young man with Doge, who they call big stuff, and he was beaten to a bloody pulp by a gang of about 12 teenagers, including girls, who beat this guy. They were trying to carjack a woman at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't think their parents are keeping a very good eye on the kids out there with the gang at 3 o'clock in the morning carjacking women. But the Democrat Party, they shout you down, mock you, and ridicule you because you're saying, I think we want to take on crime in our nation's capital. How about that? And never forget that, and I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned it yesterday, Washington, D.C. police commander was suspended a sentence. I think he was suspended without pay because he revealed that the D.C. Police Department was lying about crime statistics. I think that's the right word. When police are being instructed, oh, you arrest somebody on felony assault, just make it a misdemeanor, because we're downplaying the number of felonies and felony assaults and the number of shootings we have. And then you say, oh, violent crimes down 25%. But then you learn that a police officer, a commander, a ranking police officer in the Metropolitan Police Department, perfectly good police department if you have good leadership, but therein lies the rub, doesn't it? And the police commander had been suspended, being investigated for allegedly tweaking crime stats to make them look lower than reality. Isn't that amazing? D.C. Police Union said that the suspension is just the tip of the iceberg. Got to look out for those icebergs. I just got back from a ship trip around Iceland. You got to look out for those icebergs. They're dangerous. And this is an amazing story. D.C. Police Commander Michael Pulliam placed on leave after he and the Metropolitan Police Department command directed officers to downgrade felony reports after crime classifications such as felony assault, right? Deliberately manipulating data to falsely show a 26% drop in violent crime in 2024. If the Democrats are involved, they're lying. It really doesn't even matter what the topic is. They seem to lie a lot, don't they? And Dana Bash on CNN, January 6th was the most violent moment in recent history in D.C. No, not if you follow the news, which I think is in your job title. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, the Fraternal Order of Police also alleges the crime reports were downgraded corruptly, dishonestly. Isn't it amazing? You're Democrats, and if you want to fight crime, the Democrats want to fight you. We are at 888-630-9625. Yeah, the Democrats are fighting for crime. Average Democrats on the street or in neighborhoods are fighting for organized crime. And Jasmine, the wonderful Jasmine, who you may be fortunate enough to speak to if you call in to our humble radio broadcast at 888-630-9625. Here is the Free DC. This is what they call themselves, Free DC. Free to shoot people. Free to murder people. You've got a constitutional right to shoot people on the streets of Washington, even though it's, 3 times as dangerous as Baghdad, Iraq. The Democrats are fighting. But they've got flyers, and it's all over Al Gore's amazing internet. D.C., here's what we're going to do. In the wake of Trump's announcement that he's taking control of MPD, that's the Metropolitan Police Department, and deploying the National Guard. Oh, no, what are they doing? Starting tonight, get visible. Big red letters on a big yellow flyer. We want your help making the demand. It's always a demand, isn't it? For a # Free DC visible everywhere. Make signs, posters, banners, and flags. Just start shooting people like you usually do. And put them on your window, on your home, or anywhere else they'll be seen. Wear Free DC T-shirts. Looks like it's just a for-profit deal here. They're trying to sell T-shirts. Pins, buttons, and patches. Everywhere you go. If you don't have these, make some. And you and your neighbors, right? Starting tonight, get loud. Silence is compliance. Silence with the murders. More than 100 murders, or now at 100 murders. Probably a couple bodies they haven't found yet floating in the rivers somewhere. But you know how the Democrats are. They love mayhem. So starting tonight and every night of this occupation, go outside at 8 p.m., bang pots and pans, sing, chant. You know they love chanting. Or make noise for 5 minutes. It's time to start bowling vats of molten lead and put them on your roof. So when they attack, you can pour them on them like it's the gates of Vienna. These people are from the Middle Ages. They're not on the side of civilization. They're not liberals. They're the left. And what they're fighting for now is more crime. They're organizing more murder now. Hey now. Yeah, the media is very angry. They're very angry with President Trump. At headlines, CNN, fact check, : They love their colons. Violent crime in D.C. has fallen in 2024 and 2025 after a 2023 spike. And they blame not themselves and their children who are shooting everybody and killing everybody. They blame COVID. It's COVID because there was other people got a virus. Therefore, you had to shoot people because they're Democrats. The Democrat Party is a terribly violent party. You know? 4 American presidents have been assassinated. 3 of them were Republicans. One was John F. Kennedy, and he was killed by a communist. So or the CIA, you decide. A communist shot and killed him. 3 other presidents killed, all Republicans. And let's see, Ronald Reagan was shot, and Donald Trump was shot, and Gerald Ford was shot at. Democrats have a pretty safe go of things in the United States. But Republicans don't, because Democrats, right? And the White House, fact, : yes, D.C. crime is out of control. Makes perfect sense. The Washington Post, Trump says crime in D.C. is out of control. Here's what the data shows. And then they're going to use this deli-sliced selection of data using 2023 as the high point and saying, oh, yeah, but so many murderers were murdered in 2023 that they weren't free to murder in 2024. Isn't that great? Honestly, how many murders is the right number of murders, Democrat Party? And Michael and I were talking about this morning. Here's another reality you've got to take into account. For every murder that occurs in Washington, D.C., or for that matter, any place else, there is a murderer. So if you have, as I guess we do today, according to news media reports, 100 homicides so far in Washington, D.C., 66 square miles. So far, it's August. The year is young, and you have 100 homicides. You have approximately 100 murderers. Perhaps newly minted, perhaps not. Perhaps some of the Democrats murdered more than one person, so you don't necessarily have 100 new murderers, but close to, and then those 100 murderers are living among you. And the D.C. police have been instructed by the Democrats at the head of the snake to downplay the crimes that are being perpetrated, being committed, and on and on. Just amazing. And the Washington Post, crime in D.C. and nationwide is declining from pandemic-era spikes. Democrats had to commit more crimes because of COVID. Isn't that amazing? But individual incidents can shake residents if somebody's murdered at your front doorstep and capture the president's attention. Well, there was the double homicide of 2 employees at the Israeli embassy, which made news not just here in Washington, but in Israel, not in nationwide a little bit nationwide for the Democrats on the CBS, ABC, NBC and stuff, but not so much. But the 2 embassy employees gunned down by a racist, genocidal, anti-Semitic Democrat yelling "Free Palestine" or whatever the hell he's yelling that the Democrats are chanting. And the Washington Post, very upset. President Donald Trump once again catapulted crime in D.C. into the national conversation this week. But the news media didn't, and the Democrats in charge of D.C. didn't, and Joe Biden didn't, and 60 Minutes didn't, and the New York Times didn't, because they don't actually care about human life. They care about funding for Planned Parenthood and about banning guns or something. All these, 100 murders, I'll bet you $1 right here. All 100 guns were illegal guns, not a single legal gun among them. The Democrats, just amazing. So they say President Trump has catapulted crime in D.C. into the national conversation this week once again, putting district police under federal control Monday and deploying the D.C. National Guard to fight crime after surfacing an image of a young federal staffer beaten and bloodied in an attempted carjacking, which is just fine. And they're fine. They're good with that. Because, and President Trump says it's become one of the most dangerous cities anywhere in the world. It will soon be one of the safest, President Trump said. The Democrats don't want that. They want to fight against him. They're out on the street banging pots and pans to fight against Trump. Now, when the president says he's going to fight crime and your response is, I'm going to fight Trump, you're literally fighting for crime. You are a mental case. You're a danger to civilization. You are the bad guy. So President Trump says essentially on Truth Social, which he owns, pledging action that will essentially stop violent crime in Washington, D.C. And then the Democrats gunned somebody down on 12th Street at M Street and killed him. Now, in a news conference Monday, Trump said he had ordered a federal takeover of the D.C. police and would deploy 800 National Guard troops. Now, and they're all acting like the fake news media Democrat corruptniks who have no functioning memory of any kind. That this has never happened before. Hasn't happened since the first year of the Biden administration, where we had 4 months of National Guard occupation on the streets of Washington, D.C., because, January 6th. But what was it, May 30th of 2020? The Democrats launched a 3-day assault on the White House, injured 180 police, set fire to the Church of the Presidents, forced the evacuation of the president and the first family. And that was all fine. That was all fine. Burned the only building in Lafayette Park, Lafayette Square. Again, injured 180 police. They attacked the Reagan building across the street from Lafayette Park. They set fires. They attacked police. They looted. They burned. And the news media has forgotten all about it because George Floyd, St. George Floyd. And here's another little point. The Democrats burned the country. I don't even know how many cities because the news media never summed it up properly. I'd have to do it myself. But from Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, to Los Angeles, to Washington, D.C., to Chicago, to Atlanta, to the list goes on and on. The Democrats looted, burned, attacked police, literally because George Floyd died of cardiac failure while resisting arrest after committing yet another felony, with fentanyl and methamphetamine coursing through his veins at near fatal levels and possibly actual fatal levels. And the Democrats burned and rioted and looted and plundered and destroyed for, I guess, months on end, certainly months on end. Federal courthouses, police stations burned, attacked by violent mobs because George Floyd died, right? And that's all considered to be perfectly legitimate because Black Lives Matter, and then they give $10 to Planned Parenthood, which aborts 40% of the black population in the womb. And the Democrats are good with all of this, right? Now, George Floyd, they burned the country to the ground. Now, you have a nice young man who comes to Washington, D.C. to take an internship at a congressman's office on Capitol Hill, and he's gunned down on the streets of Washington, D.C., and there is not a riot. It's not even a news story. And the young man, who's squeaky clean and a nice guy, and he's from Massachusetts, Gesundheit, and the Democrats don't care about that. Murdered congressional intern's mom says Trump should take over Washington, D.C., and the Democrats are out there banging pots and pans and microdosing LSD to protest against fighting crime in our nation's capital. It should be a gleaming example of civilization for everyone on planet Earth. Now, ABC is just out of their minds. They say, as President Trump continues to rail against crime in the nation's capital, rail is a negative descriptor of what President Trump is doing. He's railing against crime. A congressional intern is shot and killed, but he's not George Floyd. So there's nothing to loot for. There's nothing to commit arson over, as the Democrats are so fond of doing, firebombing Jewish governors' mansions and so on. But ABC News accuses him of railing against crime in the nation's capital, saying violence is out of control and Washington, D.C. should be federalized, which it should be. The mother of a congressional intern gunned down in June told ABC News on Thursday that she agrees with the president. Sure. Since beginning his second term in the Oval Office, Trump has slammed local leaders, claiming they have not done enough to crack down on violent crime in the district. You know why it's called the district? Because it's a federal district. And the Constitution and our founders recognized the importance, politically, socially, economically, of having a carve-out for the federal government so that you don't have two super senators working for, the state, the super state that controls the seat of government. They recognized that a carve-out, a federal district, was vitally important. And they created a federal district. And then in the 1970s, liberals came up with the great idea, hey, let's take home rule or something because it's racist not to, right? So here's the news media. The president claiming that they have not cracked down enough on violent crime in the district. Obviously true, given that our homicide rate is 41 per 100,000, and in Baghdad it's 15 per 100,000. But they're fine with that. because murder is just the price you pay for defending democracy. Freedom to kill. That's the Democrat Party's mantra. The president rammed up his criticism after a 19-year-old former employee of the Department of Government Efficiency was left beaten and bloodied early Sunday, very late Saturday night, during an attempted carjacking in northwest Washington, D.C. Northwest is the best part of Washington, D.C., the least crime-ridden part of Washington, D.C. Trump said in a social media post that the incident showed crime in Washington is totally out of control. And it does show that. It does demonstrate that, as the other crimes demonstrate as well. The president also suggested that minors involved in such crimes should be prosecuted as adults, quote, starting at 14. Remember, we had those two girls murder the, Pakistani immigrant Uber driver, dragging him to death while carjacking him. And, oh, no, I'm sorry, he was from Afghanistan. And he survived Afghanistan, came here to be murdered by two teenage Democrats in Washington, D.C. Just amazing stuff. 15-year-old suspects in the attack. There were a dozen of them attacking the Doge guy, right? And you got carjackings up the yin-yang, you got all this stuff. And gunning down two employees of the Israeli embassy and killing them on May 21st. Of course, the Democrat is, they celebrate Luigi Mangione for gunning down, literally celebrate him for gunning down a CEO on the sidewalks of New York. Now, the people murdered, Israeli embassy people, young man, young woman, murdered by a 31-year-old Illinois man shouting, "Free, free Palestine." Have Democrats self-immolating and killing themselves at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. On June 30th, Eric Tarpanian Jacquem, 21-year-old intern for Congressman Ron Estes, a Republican from Kansas, was fatally shot in northwest Washington, D.C. He was shot repeatedly when he got caught in the crossfire of a drive-by shooting. Oh, he just got caught in the crossfire of a drive-by shooting, and it's okay. No arrests have been made in the homicide. President Trump said he wants to fight crime, and the Democrats want to fight in favor of crime, and that's what the criminal enterprise known as the Democrat Party is doing. And home rule should be taken away from the Democrats in Washington, D.C. All right, let's grab a phone call, Michael. Let's go to John, calling from the once great state of Maryland. John, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, John.
I had an interesting story regarding the crime stats in D.C. Probably about 15 years ago. I'm a sales rep in the metro area, and I was making a call on a apartment building on 16th Street, northwest of all places.
Uh-huh.
And walk up to the door, and there's an old guy standing out front and a lot of police activity out front. I asked him what's going on, and he said, well, they found a dead body at the bottom of the elevator shaft this morning. And I said, wow. And he said, yeah, the crazy thing is the maintenance guy that found him said he had a bag over his head and his hands tied behind his back, and the cops are saying it was a suicide. So I'm like, wow.
All right, case closed.
Make that stuff up.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. And look, the Democrats, they don't seem to be concerned with human life. You know, remember Black Lives Matter? A little bit ironic when they abort 40% of the black population in the womb. And when black homicide is at 21 per 100,000 and white homicide is at 3 per 100,000, and there's not a black leader, for that matter, a white leader in the country saying a thing about it. I've been talking about this since I started doing radio, having lived in D.C. all this time and everything. I was held up at gunpoint in Washington, D.C. in Adams Morgan when I was living in Adams Morgan a number of years ago. Two young men, they were African-American. They were fighting over which one would bust a cap in me as they fought over the pistol. Fortunately, the only thing I lost in that incident was my knife. But that's another story for another day. John, thank you. Thank you for the call. Yeah, another classic D.C. story. One of my best friends for many years was a homicide detective, D.C. Metropolitan Police. I would occasionally go out with him late at night and go to crime scenes, and he'd ask my opinion on things. It was, usually after a couple of beers, I'd have to admit, hanging out at Millie and Al's in Adams Morgan, no longer there. John, fun story. So a bag over the head, hands tied behind the back, bottom of an elevator shaft, an obvious suicide. Case closed. All right, we got a little bit of D.C. ambiance for you coming up, and the Democrats. You know, I've been saying for years now, because it's true, the left brings with them the third world. And the Democrat Party in the United States of America is the left, and they're bringing with them the third world. They are a third world party. However, I got to give credit to the third world, because I haven't found a third world capital yet that has the homicide rate that Washington, D.C. has. So the Democrats are responsible for all of this, all of it. We've got Chris Van Hollen, who likes to go to El Salvador to sit down and have margaritas with MS-13 wife-beating gang members. Chris Van Hollen, well, I want to put that on hold for a second, because they're planning on taking control of the National Guard away from the President of the United States and giving it to the district government, so I guess they can use it against the people or something like that. Well, let me do it. Van Hollen on his online page. Van Hollen, Norton, the non-voting delegate from Washington, D.C., will reintroduce bills to grant D.C. full control over its National Guard, police, as Trump plays dictator with law enforcement in the district. They're fighting for more murder and more crime and less accountability for murders. They want more murder. And he types his first sentences factually incorrect and a lie. Today, U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen, D. Maryland, and Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, D.C., announced they will reintroduce their legislation to grant the district full control, blah, blah, blah. She's not a congresswoman. She's a delegate. She's a non-voting delegate. They're trying to steal our democracy. They're trying to steal the District of Columbia. They're trying to steal 2 seats in the Senate.